The National Association of Realtors, one of the biggest names in the industry, is in serious trouble. But its new CEO, Nikia Wright, isn't just trying to patch things up. She's rebuilding the entire organization from the ground up with a massive new blueprint. So let's dive into our plan to create a totally new NAR.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of this challenge, all you have to do is listen to Nikia Wright herself. Her own words, "This is the hardest thing that I've ever done." You know, when a leader says something like that, you know this isn't just another corporate shuffle. This is a fight for the organization's soul.
All right, so here's our game plan for breaking this all down. First, we're going to meet the leader who's facing this huge task. Then, we'll get into exactly what was so broken to begin with. After that, we'll look at the details of our incredibly ambitious 75-project plan, get a feel for the new principles driving the organization, and finally, we'll tackle the biggest question of all. Can they actually rebuild trust? So first up, let's talk about the leader's toughest challenge. When Nikia Wright stepped in, yeah, she knew there were problems, but what she actually found was a full-blown crisis. As she said herself, way more was broken than most people even realize. This wasn't just about dealing with a bad headline or two. This was about a foundation that was seriously crumbling.
So what's the first thing you do when something's that broken? You have to start by listening. Before they even thought about a plan, Wright and her team spent months on a listening tour, talking to members and brokers. And the feedback they got, it was raw, it was unfiltered, and it pointed right to the core of the problem.
And what did they hear? Well, the first word that kept coming up to describe the old NAR was this: dysfunctional. I mean, that's a really powerful and pretty sobering thing to hear from your own members.
And it went beyond just being dysfunctional. They pointed straight at the money. The organization was seen as financially undisciplined. That's a huge red flag, signaling some deep systemic problems with how it was managing its resources.
And then came maybe the most damning feedback of all. They said it lacks transparency and wasn't accountable. Not to its members, not to the industry, not to anyone. You put all those things together, and it just paints a picture of a massive crisis in trust.
So you see, when you add all that up, it becomes crystal clear. The problems were so much deeper than just one legal settlement. The real crisis was this toxic mix of deep mistrust from members, financial chaos, a total lack of transparency, and a widespread feeling among brokers that they were just being ignored.
Okay, so with that brutal diagnosis on the table, it was time for the cure. And that brings us to the heart of the new strategy, the 75-project turnaround plan. This isn't just a quick list of fixes. We're talking about a whole new blueprint, designed from scratch to tackle every single one of those member complaints.
And just look at the sheer scale of this thing. This is not a minor adjustment. It's a massive, massive overhaul with 75 distinct projects. Each one is aimed at those core member concerns, and they're planning to tackle it all over the next 3 years.
And look, this isn't some vague promise to do better. There's a real structure here to keep everyone accountable. The plan officially launched back in January. Wright's team has to deliver status reports to leadership every single quarter. And there's a clear finish line in sight. A 3-year target to get the whole thing done.
Of course, a plan like this is only as good as the people who have to execute it. So Wright moved fast to reshape her team. This led to a huge staff turnover. About 1 in every 3 people is new. This wasn't just shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. This was a deliberate move to build a crew that could actually navigate through the storm. And you can really see this new direction in who they hired. A completely new executive team came on board. But here's the most telling move of all. They hired NAR's first ever chief data officer. That's a huge signal that from now on, facts and analysis are going to drive decisions, not just opinions.
So you've got the plan, you've got the people, but how do you actually make a 75-project plan work? Well, it all comes down to a new operational philosophy: data, discipline, and agility. And these aren't just corporate buzzwords, they are the real mechanics that are going to drive this massive cultural shift.
I mean, you can see the whole pivot right here. The goal is to transform the old NAR, the one everybody called dysfunctional and undisciplined, into a new NAR that is agile, that is data-informed, and most importantly, that is accountable to its members.
And this push for financial discipline, it's not just a nice idea, it's an absolute necessity. And that's because of this giant number looming over everything. The organization still has to pay over $200 million for that massive legal settlement. A number like that puts a ton of pressure on every single dollar in the budget.
So how are they going to tackle this? Wright has laid out a really clear 3-step path. First, stabilize the ship by prioritizing operational resilience. Second, Go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb to identify and cut out all the fat. And third, make sure that every single plan for the future is built on a rock-solid financial foundation.
And this all comes back to that central theme we talked about, data-informed decisions. Wright is really committed to ending the era of just going with your gut or playing internal politics. The new goal is to arm their leaders with hard data, so the decisions they make aren't just powerful, but are actually effective.
All of this leads us to the final and, frankly, the most important piece of this whole puzzle: rebuilding trust. Because at the end of the day, after all 75 projects are done and all the budgets are balanced, none of it really matters if they can't achieve this one single goal.
And what's fascinating is what the CEO herself says keeps her up at night. It's not if the plan will work. She seems really confident in that. Her biggest worry is speed. As she puts it, "My worry is going to be, will we meet the pace that the industry requires to get it done?" It's all about execution, and the clock is definitely ticking.
She's also looking beyond just fixing the internal problems. She's addressing the bigger trends in the industry with a really calm perspective. You know, when it comes to all the consolidation happening in real estate, her message is simple. It should not scare us. She just sees it as a natural evolution of the industry. So here's where we're at. NAR has a new leader, a clear vision, and a huge 75-project blueprint for a total transformation. The plan is in motion, but it all comes down to this one fundamental question. Can a new blueprint and a new leader actually rebuild an entire industry's trust? Well, only time and their ability to actually get it done is going to tell.